What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And joining me today, Chris, Fedor, cleveland.com, Cavs beat reporter, and Jimmy Watkins, cleveland.com columnist. And today, we're going to discuss all the movement that has been happening around the NBA with the trades that have taken place this summer already. Free agency just began, and it already feels like chaos has overtook the league by storm. Just to name a few, Giannis Antetokounmpo traded to the Miami Heat. Kawhi Leonard traded back to the Toronto Raptors. LaMelo Ball traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves. John Morant to the Blazers. Brandon Ingram to the Clippers. Julius Randle to the Brooklyn Nets. Miles Bridges to the Phoenix Suns. Then you also have Naz Reid to the Charlotte Hornets. And that's just a few that we have seen going on around the league. And of course, the Cleveland Cavaliers have yet to make an official move when it comes to trading pieces. They brought back a couple of free agents, but they have not made a seismic change, a momentum shifting move for this organization. Guys, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about the movement around the NBA, who you think might have won the offseason already, and what trade or what move could have been the best. Obviously, also noting that Jaylen Brown has been traded, moving on from his tenure with the Boston Celtics and joining the Philadelphia 76ers. To me, that's the biggest move we've seen and maybe the biggest impacting move for the Cleveland Cavaliers.
I would say that that might have the biggest impact, but it remains to be seen what's going to happen in Miami. I think you always have to keep an eye on Miami. They have Giannis now. Giannis is a top 5 player in the game. Giannis is maybe a top 3 player in the game. As good as Jaylen Brown was this past year, we've talked about this so many different times, guys. There are levels to this. And the greatness of Giannis, it's not on the same level as Jaylen Brown. It's just not. But Philly's roster was more complete and it was better to begin with. So adding Jaylen Brown into that roster without subtracting VJ Edgecombe or Joel Embiid or Tyrese Maxey, only subtracting Paul George and a couple of draft picks down the road, that's a more complete roster right now. That's a more ready to win roster right now. But we've talked about this so many different times. Do not count out Miami. You cannot put anything past their front office. It was the same front office that turned the Heatles into 2-time NBA champions, despite the fact that they had 2 guys under contract at the time that LeBron, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh decided to team up together in Miami. So they're going to make these other small moves around the margins, and more than likely, they're going to be an appealing destination for some of these free agents that would say, hey, some of the cap space has dried up across the league, but I have a chance to go to Miami, number 1. I have a chance to play alongside Giannis and Bam, number 2. I have a chance to play for Eric Spoelstra, number 3, and I have a chance to compete for a championship, number 4. That's appealing. If you're a guy like Chris Middleton, if you're a guy like Bradley Beal, that's appealing. Those are the kinds of guys that Miami tends to get on the cheap. So I do think that, 2 teams in the Eastern Conference stand out right away to me. And that's got to be a little bit troubling for the Cavs, because if we're talking about it right now, this is all on paper. This isn't based on what you accomplished in the past, and Boston still has to figure things out in the aftermath of trading away Jaylen Brown. But the Cavs are what, 5th or 6th right now in the hierarchy of the Eastern Conference? Maybe 4th or 5th in the hierarchy of the Eastern Conference? That's not a great place to be. In saying that, I think we knew coming into this offseason that it was going to be difficult, unless they're willing to part with Evan Mobley. It was going to be difficult for them to significantly upgrade this roster. The one thing that still looms out there that they could do that would be a seismic shift is just sign LeBron James. And now if he's open to the kind of contract that his agent Rich Paul is talking about him being open to, now the Cavs don't have to make these drastic moves around the roster just to fit his salary into it. It's just plopping an all NBA type player, one of the best players that we have ever seen. It's just plopping that guy onto a team that was already ready to compete and just went to the conference finals. So if the Cavs get LeBron, and if they don't have to shake up the roster in order to do it, now all of a sudden it's a completely different conversation around the Cavs.
Yeah, but I would say the urgency on the LeBron move is building with each one of these kind of seismic moves, right? This is why we were talking about after the Cavs got swept by the Knicks. This is why the three of us were saying like, "Hey, it's great that you broke new ground in the playoffs, but like this is not an accomplishment worth victory lapping. It wasn't good enough this year, wasn't close to good enough this year. And next year going forward, however you want to say the Cavs are going to build off this conference finals front, like the East is just going to be completely different. And that's before we knew Jaylen Brown was getting traded to Philly, just kind of creating a new contender out of thin air, right? We were thinking Boston, Indiana, insert Giannis team here. Okay, it's Miami now. That's a play-in team that is now at least a team that you have to take seriously. Like, he'd have a lot of work to do around the margins of that roster. I'll just say this: Jaylen Brown's a heck of a player. He just had the best season of his career. His stat line last year, 28.7, 5.1 assists, and was it like 6.9 rebounds, something like that? Uh, Giannis has 5 seasons with stat lines better than that, including 3 of his last 4. So, like, if Giannis is this is another thing that I think is being slept on with the Giannis thing is, like, Giannis is gonna be engaged again. Last year Giannis was, like, sleepwalking into 27, 10, and whatever because the Bucks were just kinda falling apart at the seams there. We're getting motivated Giannis. We're getting Giannis on the Heat culture diet. And with Eric Spoelstra pulling the strings for him and playing next to Bam, like, that's a real team. The Pacers with Tyrese Halliburton, we'll see. It'll probably take Tyrese a little while to get back to his usual self, but like the floor general stuff, that's all between the ears. Like, I think that'll be there right away. The Pacers are going to go back to being the Pacers pretty quick here, I think. That's a real team. Philadelphia 76ers, whether Joel Embiid is playing or not, that's the other thing about that trade is like Jaylen Brown gives you some more like insurance, a backbone to stand on where, okay, if Joel Embiid has to sit 60% of the games during the regular season, whatever you got to do to get that guy healthy, it's fine. You got 3 all-star caliber players. Edgecombe hasn't made it yet, but I can see it in his future there to run the show while he's not there. It's another great team. Boston, I don't know what the heck Boston is thinking with this trade, but like I'm still not sneezing at Jason Tatum, Derek White, Paul George, and the rest of their whatever moves they're going to make on the margins here. Like I'm not sneezing at that either. So it would be great for the Cavs to get LeBron. That's how I felt like 3 days ago. Now I'm thinking the Cavs need LeBron. The Cavs need LeBron to have a serious chance of like really contending in these. And they'll like, among these teams, they might still be, top 3 in the regular season. They're built to be a regular season wins machine. And we'll see if they don't get LeBron, they're going to do something to fill this open slot on the wing. We'll see what that is. But in terms of contention pecking order, like other teams have made bigger moves. So I'm with Chris. They're falling. They're slipping down that ladder in a dangerous way here. And LeBron signing, I'm confused about what exactly this discount would be because I think people have seen Shams like lumped all the tax exceptions and hey maybe the minimum together, and now people are saying oh LeBron's gonna take the minimum. LeBron's gonna take the minimum. I don't think LeBron's taking the minimum personally. I don't think LeBron's taking the minimum unless you make such a convincing move with your roster otherwise that he like if the Cavs trade for LeBron's buddy Anthony Davis, so to speak, or the Warriors trade for LeBron's buddy Anthony Davis. Maybe then LeBron rewards you by taking the minimum or taking less of your mid-level exception, whichever version of that you have. But this idea that like LeBron's ready to play for 3.4 million next year, no questions asked, because it's all about happiness, that doesn't ring the truest to me.
But I agree with you from the standpoint of, the Cavs got to this point where these other teams are making these other moves that have been significant upgrades to them. Philly is just a completely different threat now in the Eastern Conference. And the Knicks just won the championship. So despite the fact that they've had some losses and departures, you can't just completely overlook them. You can't discount their ability to have another really strong season. Indiana is going to come back. So we've talked about all of that, right? Because of those things that have happened, it's no longer the Cavs. Well, if they trade for PJ Washington and they fix their small forward spot, like they're good. They're fine. They're right there with those other teams. Or it's like, okay, if the Cavs go out and they sign Rui Hachimura or they go out and sign Kenrich Williams, like what do those things do compared to what has already been done. And that's the place that the Cavs are at. So if you're talking about, what is realistic for the Cavs at this stage of free agency, if we're not talking about Evan Mobley, and I don't think there's any reason to think that the Cavs had any conversations or actually thought about the possibility of including Evan Mobley in a Jaylen Brown trade. I don't think there's any reason to think that they did. I think they dismissed that.
You want to know how we know that? Because we saw the Jaylen Brown trade package. That's how we know that. If Evan Mobley was on the table, he'd be on the Celtics.
Do I think that the Cavs had, other conversations with Boston and tried to put together, a different kind of non-Evan Mobley package for Jaylen Brown? Yes. Yes, I do. I think the Cavs discussed those things internally, and I do think that they had those conversations with Boston. But not for Evan Mobley. It was for the other stuff. So it is pretty clear that when you have an offseason where Jaylen Brown has changed teams and Giannis has changed teams, and the Cavs had the piece to get either one of those guys in Evan Mobley, and they chose not to, that he's not going anywhere. So now, if you're not going to significantly upgrade your roster through a trade because you're not willing to part with the piece that would do that, now you're looking at what? Free agency? So the only other possibility for the Cavs, if it's not Rui Hachimura, if it's not Kenrich Williams, if it's not some of these other guys who are fine and who are potentially helpful, but if you're trying to keep up in this new Eastern Conference arms race, it's LeBron or nothing. That's where they're at right now.
And isn't that a crazy scenario to be in? That you're praying that 42-year-old LeBron James is going to come back? We all understand how great LeBron James is, but to be putting your entire offseason plans on hold to see if you can get one player.
Well, what are your other offseason plans? I don't think they're putting their offseason plans on hold. I don't think they have the ability to make an offseason plan at this point. What's the offseason plan? Sign who for the veterans minimum that's going to help this team? From a financial standpoint, that's where they're at, unless they're willing to make a significant trade to upgrade the roster. I don't think it's putting anything on hold. It's hoping that he's willing to take less money so that they don't have to go into the wing market in this free agency class that's already been picked apart, and only thing left are scraps.
Sure. What I'm saying is I think it's difficult for the Cavs to have to look at what you were saying earlier about not being able to go get Giannis, not being able to go get Jaylen Brown, or just even being in these conversations. And now you circle back to, well, all of our eggs are in one basket. And that's difficult to stomach, right? And obviously understanding that, as you mentioned, they had the biggest piece, the best piece available for them to go make these moves. And they're kind of holding their hat on the development of Evan Mobley and understanding that the Cavs are still on Donovan Mitchell's timeline, as they've mentioned to us a multitude of different ways, a multitude of different times, but also knowing that they haven't made the moves necessary to prove that they are a championship contending team. So I'm curious, as we've talked about, the Eastern Conference is already getting stronger and they're continuing to make moves around them. Detroit went and got shooting that they needed. Boston's a different conversation. As Jimmy said, I'm a little confused unless the Boston Celtics are going to make another move around what they just did, trading away Jaylen Brown and getting Paul George. Obviously, they got draft capital, which is great, but are they a better team by losing Jaylen Brown and gaining Paul George? I'm skeptical. New York, still going to be one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. Toronto just got Kawhi Leonard back. Atlanta hasn't really made too many significant moves. Philadelphia just got Jaylen Brown. Charlotte Hornets, they got off LaMelo Ball and added some pieces around what they already had to be a decent core. Miami now has Giannis. These teams continue to get better and continue to improve, not only around the margins, but in bigger swings, and yet the Cavs stand pat. Other than LeBron, and we've talked about this, it feels like this Cavs team doesn't have a pathway forward other than relying on the depth that they have currently. And they're still in a financial place where that's a difficult pill to stomach. What do you guys think about where this Cavs team would be potentially should they simply run it back with the team that they have, including James Harden, without LeBron James on this team? are they still a top-5 team in the Eastern Conference?
Probably not, because if LeBron doesn't come here to Cleveland, then that means he may go to Miami or he may go to Philadelphia. So all of a sudden, those two teams become more formidable than what they look like right now. Obviously, he could go to Golden State, Denver. There are a bunch of different places. But I think when it comes to LeBron, we just go based on what his agent, Rich Paul, is saying at this moment, because we've talked about this on the podcast. Happiness means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And defining somebody else's happiness is a fool's errand. So we don't know ultimately. And I think that's part of the reason why Rich Paul phrased it that way. Because happiness is such a vague term that no matter what he picks, he can just turn around and say, well, this is the place that's going to make LeBron the happiest. And that's what it's about at this stage of his career. But we do have some information from Rich Paul about what is appealing to LeBron and what's going to drive this decision. And the thing that he continues to talk about, the reporting that continues to be out there, is what? He wants to compete for a championship. He's looking for a place that has a roster that's ready to compete for a championship or has a roster that can make moves to get better to compete for a championship. So if you're LeBron, and that's one of the things that's driving this decision, you're starting to look at these rosters. You're starting to look at how they're set up. Down in Miami, they've got Giannis and Bam. It's pretty attractive, right? If you're LeBron and you're trying to compete for a championship, take the sentimental stuff out of it for a second. Take the the non-basketball stuff out of it for a second. If we're just talking about competing, winning another title, going out on top, let's talk through it. Cleveland or Miami, Philadelphia or Miami, Golden State or Miami, Denver or Miami. The Cavs have a case. They certainly have a case here. They got to the Eastern Conference Finals. Okay, they got walloped by the Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals. One of the most lopsided conference finals series of all time. But they got there. They have Donovan Mitchell. They have James Harden. They have Evan Mobley. They have Jared Allen. We're talking about a team that already has, 4 of the top 50 best players in the NBA on it? That's a pretty good setup. It's a pretty good setup if you're LeBron and you're looking at a basketball-related reason to go there. Now, does it mean that it's the most complete roster? No, I don't think so. Not anymore. Look at Philly. Are you kidding me? That's got to be attractive to somebody like LeBron. If this is in large part about winning and being happy in your final year, maybe final year in the NBA. And LeBron has always been about winning and chasing championships. I don't think the Cavs anymore win the basketball argument as it stands today. I don't think they do. So at that point, you throw all the nostalgia at LeBron. You try and tug on his heartstrings and try and fill his happiness bucket a different kind of way. It doesn't mean that the Cavs have a bad roster. I don't want it to be mistaken. I think it's a better basketball situation than Golden State, okay? But is it a better basketball situation than Philly? This new version of Philly? Is it a better basketball situation than what Miami looks like? And is it a better basketball situation than, say, the Denver Nuggets? You answer that. Because that's what LeBron has to answer.
But at the same time, if it was solely championship focused, then
I don't think it's solely. It's a big driver of the decision, though.
That's why the finalists, or the perceived finalists, we don't really know. Golden State, Miami, and Cleveland. Because it's not because if it was solely championship, okay, go play with OKC, go play with the Spurs, whatever.
Go to the Knicks.
I think logistics are playing some role in this. He already has a house at Cleveland. I don't know what his situation is in Miami at this point, but he has lived there before. Golden State's only, 40-minute flight away, 50-minute flight away from Los Angeles. LeBron has some easy access to those kinds of flights. So I wonder about the basketball logistics of this. It's okay, we're not just comparing rosters. Think about ease of fit, ease of chemistry. And I believe that LeBron could eventually figure out whatever puzzle you put in front of him on the basketball court. But another if, we don't know, if this is his last season. And, Kevin O'Connor reported that he might be shopping like an episodic or film documentary about next season.
I do think we have to point out that there was a camera crew that followed LeBron everywhere he went last year, too, including when he came here to Cleveland.
But I think it's different for him to be like shopping it now.
Yeah, that's true.
If that's true, I just want to throw that out there. That is a hint that it could be his last season. I think LeBron has probably already changed his mind a couple of times on when his last season would be. So I don't, we can't take any of this with as concrete information. I'm just saying, if that were to be the case, they didn't call it the second to last dance, folks. Okay,
The penultimate dance.
that's not what they're filming for. Okay, so if it's a short runway, I think that's probably like the biggest feather under Golden State's cap is like, hey, these guys. You've played with Steph before. You and Draymond have clearly had this conversation before. So you have a better idea of what it would look like. Whereas with like Donovan Mitchell and James Harden, they still have to figure out. Those two, independent of LeBron, have to figure out the right balance of usage as we saw at times last year in the playoffs. They're still trying to figure that out. Like James Harden has only played with Donovan Mitchell for like 3 months. Whether LeBron comes or not, those two are going to be in the lab a lot this summer, maybe like shooting film clips back and forth. They're talking a lot during training camp as we saw them, when practice was open. They were always having little conversations about what they were seeing out there. And during games is the same thing. So like, I think that's an interesting thing to consider too, is like, how quickly can you make it fit with Don, James, Jared Allen, Evan Mobley? How quickly can you make it fit with Bam and Giannis, two non-spacers? Bam's shooting them. They're not going in. They're not going in. Those three, he's trying to stretch his game out there. But to this point, we haven't seen him go in yet. So that, like, the ease of fit is an interesting conversation in this too. Have we mentioned the Raptors yet? The Raptors freaking got Kawhi.
You're right about that, yeah.
That's one more team that's just like this team just took you to 7 games without their starting point guard and without their all-star that they just upgraded on in a major way. Of course, we don't know like how many games is Kawhi going to play, but if he's there in May, that team is a freaking problem.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, we brought up Kawhi a couple times, but never really settled in. With all of that in mind, and LeBron still having to make his decision, and it being said that it's going to take some time, finally see where all of the pieces land and what the best option is. Before he makes his decision, can we do a way too early number 1 team in the Eastern Conference? Because sure, wherever he goes is going to vastly impact that. But when you look at the Eastern Conference, when you look at these teams getting better, Indiana obviously being one of the worst teams in the Eastern Conference last year could rise back up to a contending team. Where do you guys think the Cavs sit, and who do you think is above them in this race for getting to the NBA Finals, which we know is the baseline for this Cavs team this coming season?
Well, I'd say New York is above them. I'd say the idea of Philly is above them. They just agreed to a deal with Anthony Simons to come off the bench at a 6-man role. Former Cavs GM Mike Gansey is cooking this offseason. So, look, we have to see what it all looks like with Philly, but geez, that might be the best starting 5 in the NBA. And yeah, Dean Wade's a part of it as of now. If you put LeBron in that starting 5, now there's just like no argument. That's the best starting 5 in the NBA. So I would say New York is above them. Philly is above them. I think Miami has the potential to be above them, depending on what else they do with that roster. And I have so much belief that they're going to fortify it. And I think the Raptors are very, very close with the Cavs. So to me, like, despite the fact that the Cavs are coming off a conference finals appearance, they're kind of right where they were at the end of the season, right in that 4, 5, 6 range. And if other things happen around the East or still happen around the East, they are dangerously close to being in that play-in mix, or at least closer to the play-in mix than they are to the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, and again, regular season, I think they'll be okay. The Cavs are going to roll the ball out and win 50 games. That's what they've done basically since Donovan got here. They need to figure out some defensive stuff. Like, if LeBron doesn't show up, like, who the heck is guarding wings on this team? Like, Evan Mobley and Jared Allen played a lot last year, and they were a mid defense. Mediocre. Below top 10 for the first time in that pairing's regular season history. So that's like a big question. That's a big question. The offense needs to be excellent. I think it will be, but it needs to be. It needs to be excellent. And as far as like, I agree with most. I think Miami, is hard to say. I think in year one, I could see them being more spunky than they are contender. Like Miami falls under like would be a tough first round draw. Wouldn't be thrilled about seeing them. But I'd probably pick the Cavs in that playoff series. We don't need to go over New York again. I still think Boston. I don't know what Boston is doing right now, but they still have a decent amount of talent on that team. And I would have picked them over the Cavs last year. I would probably still do that again. Like can't assume this, that Paul George is on the court. The Pacers are going to be back. The Pistons feel like they're really fumbling a bag this offseason by not really meaningfully upgrading their roster. John Collins, big shrug from me. But like at the same time, they won 60 games last year. They pushed the Cavs to 7 games. If Jalen Duren just isn't bad, what if Jalen Duren is just not bad in the playoffs? They're a completely different team. Completely different team. And what if they even they realize once again, oh yeah, we do need more shooting, and they get it at the trade deadline. That would be a team that I'm watching out for. So it's just like this contention window just got a lot more crowded. Last year was like the clearest path that you could see for the Cavs, and we kept trying to hammer that point home that it was going to get more crowded. And now it's getting even more crowded than we thought before. So again, that just underlines, I would probably default to the Knicks as the number one because they just ran through the East. But this is just to underline, there is real urgency with this LeBron stuff now. Like if you don't get him, alarms are going off a little bit.
Jimmy, to your point about Detroit, while I do think their front court depth is going to be shaky, obviously losing Beef Stew, Isaiah Stewart is huge for them, and then the potential to lose Jalen Duren is also huge. But they did add shooting. They did go get Isaiah Joe, right? They did add some players that can make an impact on floor spacing and all the things around Kate Cunningham, who is already an otherworldly type of player. But I agree with you. I think they're going to be an interesting team to keep an eye on. They could be shaky depending on what their depth looks like throughout the regular season. 82 games is long. We all understand the caveats to all of these situations. But I do think it's going to be extremely interesting to see where LeBron James ends up and the significance of how badly the Cavaliers need him because of what their depth currently looks like and who is guarding players on the perimeter after losing Dean Wade, after losing Keon Ellis, and then also understanding their small forward depth is currently just Max Strus and Jalen Tyson. Max Strus is currently being shopped around as well. So there's obviously moves that could be made around the margins for the Cleveland Cavaliers to improve, to get better. I'm curious to see what they're willing to do, or if we're reverting back to the conversation we had as soon as the season was over with, are the Cavs just going to run this back and see what the talent lies with James Harden and Donovan Mitchell riding the ship and leading this organization after having a full summer, a full training camp, and a full year together? I think it's going to be an interesting conversation throughout the remaining of the summer, but we have to wait and see what the Cavs actually go and do.
What if Orlando's best player and coach like each other next year? That's another potentially meaningful
Of course, it's
change.
a variable, yes.
They're extremely talented, and they're young. Like some of these other teams who have way more of a leg to stand on by betting on internal development, like it might happen. It might happen for them. Whereas the Cavs are like, we'll be better next year with 37-year-old James Harden, another year under our belt. It's like, okay, maybe. I could see it. Evan Mobley takes the leap, maybe, with Donovan Mitchell and James Harden dribbling around to quote JB Bickerstaff. Maybe, but these other teams I can see a clearer path for them.
Okay, so then let's talk about it from this standpoint. That's how we see things if the Cavs were to run it back. How does that change your thinking if the Cavs get LeBron? And they don't have to shake up the roster significantly in order to do it. And what I mean by that is they don't have to trade Jared Allen. They don't have to salary dump Max Strus. If they do Dennis Schroeder, I don't know that that's a significant thing, but they hang out in this scenario. They hang on to Jared Allen. They hang on to Evan Mobley. They hang on to Max Strus.
I think that's a vastly different team.
Okay, so then where do they fall in the rankings then?
I think they would be top 3 in the Eastern Conference if they get LeBron James and they don't have to workshop an entire roster reconstruction. If they had a starting lineup of James Harden, Donovan Mitchell, LeBron James, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen, I think they're a top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. But you also have to understand who they have behind them, right? That then allows Jalen Tyson to have a simpler role. You have an easier pathway to getting Sam Merrill the ball with a better passer, with more spacing, with more gravity on the floor. You potentially still have Max Strus, right? In that lineup, you then have two of the best passers of all time in LeBron and James Harden, and then you have two of the best movement shooters in the league in Sam Merrill and Max Strus, right? There are definitely things that make sense when/if LeBron James comes to Cleveland. But again, the biggest thing for me is then the front court depth. And sure, that's a regular season issue more than it is a postseason issue because most of those minutes are going to go to Jared Allen and Evan Mobley anyway. But Thomas Bryant as a third big, I like the move. I like him as a third big option for the Cavs. But in a regular season, how much are you going to be able to rely on that kind of front court depth as well? But I do think if LeBron comes to Cleveland, the Cavs end up being a top 3 team.
Yeah, moving past the teams, all the teams I have to squint at. You mentioned I like the idea of Philadelphia over the Cavs right now. Well, I don't care about your ideas anymore. There's a real live LeBron over here. And I mean that there's something of like the idea of this Cavs team too, because he's going to be 42 and James Harden will be 37. We'll just have to slap that disclaimer in the corner of our names on this podcast every time we record, if LeBron gets here, because disclaimer, this team is depending on the success of two 37 plus year old superstars for their success. Okay, we all understand that, but like assuming that they are around, I would move them pat. Like I don't care about Orlando anymore. I don't care about Miami anymore. I don't care about the Pistons anymore. I care probably about like the Knicks, the Celtics, and I'm really high on this Kawhi trade, man. I think that's probably the tier that I would put the Cavs in. That would be my clumped top tier of the Eastern Conference.
I'm right there with you. I think it's very, very similar. And I think that shows, as you were talking about, Jimmy, the urgency and the difference in what the Cavs can potentially accomplish with and without LeBron.
So given that, Wendy keeps saying the way to impress LeBron is to add to your roster. Obviously, that's very difficult for the Cavs, but like, can we see a little get up and go? Can we, Kobe, can we get up? I'm sure he's on the phone, right? It's his job this time of year. He's on the phone 1,000 times a day. But like, if LeBron is this make or break for you, I don't know how they feel about it, but we feel this way, that LeBron is this make or break for you. I'd be shopping whoever I need to shop to make him to get him here.
I'm just wondering what is realistic and what's available to them that would get LeBron's attention. Because they're not getting Jaylen Brown, they're not getting Giannis, they didn't get Kawhi. So what else is out there? Is Herbert Jones gonna get LeBron's attention? Is like PJ Washington gonna get LeBron's attention in a potential trade? You don't just want to start throwing out a bunch of names, but is Cam Johnson going to get LeBron's attention? Those caliber players, that's what we're kind of looking at right now. And I just wonder, with Wendy saying all this kind of stuff, is that more directed at the teams that like need more of an influx of talent? Like Philly had to do something else, right? Boston maybe had to do something else. The Lakers would have had to do something else to get LeBron's attention. Like, we're going to make all these moves. This is what the roster looks like. Now, what do you think? Miami had to do something, and they did. They went out and got Giannis. Now, all of a sudden, Miami is a different kind of appeal for LeBron. Was he really talking about the Cavs? I mean, they already have 4 of the top 50 players in the NBA on one roster. So what else can they do at this point realistically that LeBron's going to look at it and say, okay, now you mean business? If he can't already see the talent on this roster, if he can't already recognize that this team just came off an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, then that's bad on him. It felt like to me that, that was more for the teams that weren't already positioned as well as the Cavs were from a basketball standpoint. Golden State in particular. Like, cool. You got Steph, you got Draymond, you just brought back Porzingis. But like from a basketball standpoint, maybe you're the team that has to do something more to entice LeBron. because you don't know when Jimmy's going to be back or how he's going to play when he does come back. So I don't know. Man, it's hard for me to say that that was directed at the Cavs. Now, if they would have gone out and got Jaylen Brown and they would have reconfigured the roster, like that's something that's obviously going to catch LeBron's attention. Be like, whoa, okay. Now we've got Donovan Mitchell, James Harden, Jaylen Brown, and me. Like that's really different. Jaylen Brown's really different in terms of readiness to compete for a championship than Evan Mobley or Jared Allen, hypothetically. So I find it hard to believe that, the Cavs, from a basketball standpoint, again, I don't think they're on the same level as Philly. I wonder how LeBron sees the Cavs roster compared to the Miami Heat. But it's not like this is the Lakers at the time that LeBron joined the Lakers in 2018, and they got to significantly overhaul the roster to make it competitive. It's not like we're talking about the Washington Wizards, some big leap of faith that LeBron has to make, or the Charlotte Hornets or something like that. This roster, as it stands right now, without significant movements, if LeBron looks at it and says, okay, what's this look like with me added to it? I think the view of it is obviously, compelling enough, especially compared to, maybe some of the other ones.
Couple things. One, I love the idea of the Lakers pitching their offseason to LeBron and Pelinka going, yeah, and then we're going to trade the farm for Walker Kessler. Hello, are you still there? Rich? Rich, did you get a bad connection? I love that. I love that. Number two, I think your point is fair that the Cavs could come to LeBron and be like, hey, we're so up against, we're spending, we have 4 former All-Stars on our team, really, what more can we do for you? I think that's fair for them to think that way, but it would also make me nervous that LeBron is then putting this carrot out for somebody else, because that to me would say that if somebody else does make a move, maybe he perceives Golden State plus Anthony Davis or Philly plus Jaylen Brown. I would also say a subtexter asked us about this today. Wendy was talking Jaylen Brown for the Cavs, and that could get them LeBron. So does this mean LeBron's going to Philly? I think Wendy was just saying that would be a kind of move that would get LeBron's attention. I don't think there's actually a ton of connection to Jaylen Brown's destination and LeBron's destination. I don't know. We'll see. They've been on the periphery of other LeBron free agencies before, but never say never. I would not think he's going to end up in Philly. We'll see. But I would also, we're 41 minutes in here. The one name I would say that could virtually guarantee the Cavs LeBron would be if they traded for Anthony Davis. That's what I would say. And what do we think about that? It would be Jared Allen plus some contracts, probably, right? That would be it. How do we feel?
And that's a yes.
And Mark Spears has been reporting that the Wizards are not shopping Anthony Davis, which also could just mean try harder
For sure.
than whatever is being offered to the Washington Wizards, because the Washington Wizards starting lineup of Trae Young, AJ DeMonsa, whoever else, Anthony Davis, it makes a little bit of sense.
Anthony Davis here, and if you're only talking about giving up Jared Allen, now all of a sudden you don't need AD to be number 1 option AD or number 2 option AD. He can slide into this late career role that's probably better for him. He doesn't want to play center. He has made that pretty clear. So you could theoretically make Evan Mobley do that and AD play the 4, even though one's physically more capable of doing one versus the other, but still. Just tell him to rebound, block shots, clean up misses. We're going to run some plays for you, of course. We are going to give you the ball in the post and face-up opportunities for sure. But, you don't have to kill yourself to go out there and get 25 a night like you did in the prime of your career. And that might be appealing for somebody like AD. So if you switch out Jared Allen and all the things that he brings in terms of value and effectiveness, and now it's AD you're asking to do those things, yes, you're sacrificing some age of Jared Allen, although he's not a spring chicken here. I do think despite, some of the things that you would wonder about AD's history, his age, his contract and how big it is, all that kind of stuff, I do think that is a move that if you're the Cavs, you make. And I certainly would be willing to do that. I'm not making the decisions, of course, but I would be willing to do that. And now all of a sudden you have somebody that's the kind of guy that LeBron looks at and says, hey, that's more appealing. I know more about Anthony Davis than I do about Jared Allen. I trust Anthony Davis more than I do Jared Allen. I have more respect for Anthony Davis than I do Jared Allen because I won a championship with him. So yes, I would do that.
I think there's also just the difference between an 82 game problem and a 16 game problem, right? The health and the age stuff. Obviously, the Cavs, if they had a roster or a starting lineup of James Harden, Donovan Mitchell, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and Evan Mobley, you become one of the oldest starting lineups in the NBA, if not the oldest starting lineup in the NBA. But that doesn't necessarily matter for the 82 game season because you're not worried about what seeding you have. You have LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Donovan Mitchell, and James Harden. You get to the 16 game problem and you're looking around and you're like, nobody has more experience. Nobody has more depth. Nobody has more, all of these other things, all of these key pieces for the Cavs. And obviously, Anthony Davis, like, as Chris mentioned, is not a spring chicken. He's 33 years old. He's going to end up turning 34 in March of next year. So there's an understanding of where he's at in his career as well. But Jimmy, I'm glad you brought it up. I was thinking about it while you were talking. What you would need to do to get LeBron James to come to Cleveland other than all of the happiness scenario, all of the ending your career on the best note, whatever that may be. I think Anthony Davis coming to Cleveland alongside LeBron James, as I was mentioning on a recent podcast, it feels like LeBron wants to be paired with someone or a player that he can trust and say, I don't necessarily want to have all of this burden on me. I already have the weight of Cleveland on my shoulders. Can you help me take some of the load off of what I have to do on the basketball court? That also could be a product of playing with Luka Doncic for a few years now and having the understanding that what he was able to do alongside another great player elevated his game. I think it's an interesting conversation for why LeBron James continues to be paired or connected with a team that also has a star that he has some kind of connection with already.
Well, that's also the beauty of coming here to Cleveland with Donovan Mitchell and James Harden. The burden doesn't have to be on LeBron on the offensive end of the floor. The responsibility of winning a championship doesn't solely have to be his. It's not the same situation as 2014 where, he had to correct all these bad habits that Kyrie Irving had, and he had to teach him how to be a winning basketball player. If Donovan Mitchell knows how to win, James Harden knows how to win, they know what it takes to win, not at the highest level, not to win a championship, not to be a champion, but it's not the same situation as a young Kyrie Irving who knew nothing except for loss after loss after loss, losing streak, ping pong balls, and stuff like that. So if you're LeBron, and that's something else that has been reported, can you find guys to play alongside that are going to do a lot of the heavy lifting? The Cavs, the answer to that question is yes. Just like Philly's answer would be yes. Just like, Miami's answer, it might be short on one, but they have one guy for sure that can do that. Golden State has one guy that can for sure do that. So I would say that is an appeal of Cleveland, playing alongside Donovan Mitchell and James Harden, the responsibility that they have on the offensive end.
Especially given the age concerns, right? Like the concern is they'll wear down like they just did. But if you have LeBron, Donovan, and James, and that's not going to always be perfect. There will be some your turn, my turn. That's how it works when all dominant players get together. But like if they can all give each other, kind of spell each other over the course of 82 and in the playoffs, like the hope is that all three will still have enough left by the end of the year to get it done. There will still be moments where like, hey, late clock, fourth quarter, LeBron, we still need you to orchestrate this possession. But like if you get to that point, it's already a success. If you can get to that point and he's able-bodied and willing to be in those shoes or able to be in those shoes, like that's a huge win. The other thing I would just say about the Anthony Davis thing, this is why the whole LeBron thing is so complicated. It's funny that the Wizards have so much power over the league right now. The Wizards, who have been an abject disaster for 50 years. You could argue that they're the domino that will knock over all this stuff if they end up trading Anthony Davis. But they know this. The thing is, the Wizards know this, so they're being very difficult. That message to Mark Spears that Anthony Davis isn't available. That's an acknowledgement that like, hey, we know you all need to get Anthony Davis to get LeBron, so the price of the brick has gone up. Like Anthony Davis, bad contract and all. We could talk about if you acquire him, do you extend him? Rich Paul certainly wants you to, and LeBron and Rich Paul are usually aligned on those sorts of things. Um, so there's a ton of reasons why in a vacuum, trading for Anthony Davis wouldn't be that hard. Shouldn't cost you that much. But the Warriors are finding, and the Cavs may find, that the Wizards can ask for flatly ridiculous trade packages for Anthony Davis, who, for the record, when we're comparing him with Jared Allen played 56 games last year. That's like tied for the least Jared Allen's ever played. Then he played 18 playoff games, so 74 games altogether. That's more than Anthony Davis has played in the last 2 seasons combined. Um, the Wizards can just make ridiculous requests because they know that these teams, the Warriors and Cavs, very similarly, it's like, we better get LeBron or else where are we going here? So they're like, it's like this on a much smaller scale, much older scale. It's a little Clippers thundery with the PG Kawhi trade because and ironically, Michael Winger came from the OKC front office, the Wizards GM. He's looking at this like, you're not trading for Anthony Davis. You're trading for Anthony Davis and LeBron James. You're trading to become a legit contender here. So I'm going to need you to pay a price that is requisite with that kind of move.
I think it's hilarious that we had a conversation built in about how the league is getting better and the trades around it. And somehow, of course, LeBron James is steering the ship of where this Cavs team is going to go. He could end up being the savior once again, although he's not going to be the guy that is taking over games and things of that nature. It's going to be because of how he impacts winning around him. And yet he could make or break where the Cavs end up in the standings next year as well, particularly if he ends up coming to the Eastern Conference and not choosing the Cleveland Cavaliers. But we'll have to wait and see what LeBron James does, and as Rich Paul, and it has been reported, it's going to be a while. So maybe we'll just be eating our popcorn for a little bit as we wait to see where LeBron James lands, how it impacts the Eastern Conference, and most importantly, how it changes the trajectory of the Cleveland Cavaliers 2026-2027 season. But until then, with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. Sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.